Hello everyone, welcome to Me Life Studies. In today's video, we are going to solve one more SQL problem as part of data analyst or data engineer interview. You can see here that is of question number 14, return players and their total runs score, those who did at least 2 half centuries and did not out for a duck. See, we have given two input tables, that is matches and players, and we need to find out those players who did not out for a duck and did 2 half centuries at least. And you can see here we have expected output. Okay, now we are going to write a SQL query to return those players who did not out for duck and did 2 half centuries at least. Okay, now I already inserted data into this table that you can see here, the same data, that is matches and players. This is the data you can see here. Now we need to return what we need to return. We need to return players name and their total runs scored, right? Select. You can see here these are the match details having match ID, player ID and runs scored, and this is the players details having ID and name. This ID is nothing but player ID and this name is nothing but player name. Now if you see these two tables, what is the commonality? That is, what is that? ID, right? I mean, this is the player ID and this is player ID. So we will join these two tables on the basis of player ID. Okay, and we need to return this name and the total scored by each player, right? Now we need to return a name that is from players table, so I am referring that as p dot name, and also I need to return the total scores, right? Sum of total score, I mean, for each player they are played multiple matches, so we need to use sum of and runs scored is from matches table, so I'm just referring that as matches m scored from which table? Players P, and I'm going to join this table with matches M on which basis the condition is commonality is player ID. So I'm referring that as P dot ID is equals to M dot player ID, right? Now if you see, we are going to finding the total runs scored for each player, so we need to use group by P dot name. Okay, now if you execute this one, you will see a player name and their total score, but we need a players who did not out for duck and did 2 half centuries at least, right? So we need to return this is runs. Okay, total scores. Now we will see how many half centuries are done by each player. Okay, now we are going to count, I mean, if a player did a half century, then we count it as one match, one he did half century for one match. Okay, now we'll start counting case when, I'll write conditional statements case when, and you can see here data from matches. This is runs scored, player ID and match ID. Okay, now we are going to find out whenever runs scored is greater than or equal to 50, then we count that match is of century for those particular players, right? Now case when m dot runs scored is at least a 50, I mean is greater than or equal to 50, then we returning those particular match ID. So that in that match this particular player did an half century. Okay, now we return match ID. If not, we'll return null. Okay, and we'll end it as half centuries. Okay, now if we execute this one, you can see here Buttler did 1 half century and total score is 77. Dekock did 2 half centuries and total score is 170. Now you can see here, okay, Warner did not any half centuries, did any half century, so that is written as 0. Okay, now we will find a player who out for duck or not, how many matches a player out for duck. Okay, now we will use again conditional statements. I'll write count of, I'm going to count a number of matches for a player is out for duck or not. Okay, case when m dot runs scored is equals to 0, then I'm going to return those particular matches ID, and if not, I'm going to else end it as null, and end it as out for duck. Okay. Now if I execute this one, I'm going to this command. Now you can see here a player who did number of off centuries and out for duck or not in how many matches. These numbers are nothing but matches, number of matches that a player out for duck. See, we need to filter out this entire table having, I mean, those players who did at least 2 off centuries and not out for duck in any matches. Okay. Now I'm going to assign this as CTE as, okay. Now I'm going to filter out this. I'm going to return name, comma, total runs, right, runs from CTE where half centuries is at least greater than or equal to 2, right, at least 2, and out for duck is 0, right. I mean those players who did not out for duck, so that is why we need to return 0. Now if I execute this one, sorry, this is out for duck. Okay. Now if I execute this one, you can see here Dekock, who runs a total of 170 score, and Milder 165. These two players who did 2 off centuries and did not out for duck. Okay. Now I'll solve this same problem with using having clause. Okay. Now I'll return select p.name and total runs scored, right. So that is from matches. So I'm going to sum of m dot runs scored from players P join matches M on P dot ID is equals to M dot player ID, right. So I'm going to group by P dot name. Okay. Now if you execute this one, you can see player names and the total runs, right. Now I refer this as runs. Now you can see a player who did total scores, right. Now I'm going to filter out this by using having of what having class will be used to filter out grouping functions, I mean aggregate functions, right. Now we need to filter out these players who did at least 2 off centuries, right. Now I'm going to count number of half centuries. Okay. Now I need to return those players who did half centuries, right. Now I'm going to count it as number of half centuries for each player. See, count of case when m dot runs scored is greater than or equal to 50, then I'm going to return as m dot match id, right, or else I return null. Okay. I'm end this as, see, you need not to end this. You can see here, I mean inside you should use end, and see I'm going to using having keyword, so we will use this for filtering aggregate function, right. Now we need to filter out those players who did at least 2 off centuries, right. This represent number of matches a player did off centuries, right. Now I'm going to filter this is equals to greater than or equal to 2. Okay. and also I'm going to filter out number of matches for a player out for duck. M dot runs scored is equals to 0. Then I'm going to return match ID, else null, end it as. Now if you see here, okay, end, this is equals to 0. See, this represents a matches runs is, I mean number of runs scored by each player is 0. Then I'm going to return as match ID, okay, else I'm going to return as 0. This means a player who's dug out for dog, we are going to count it, right? So this count has to be 0. Okay, now if I execute this one, you can see here these two players. See, these represents number of score, I mean number of runs is 0, then it is returning matches. If it is not 0, then it is not out, right? So this represents number of outs, that is duck. Okay, so it is 0, those players who did not out for duck. Okay, now if you execute the same output that you are seeing, right? So these are the two players who did not out for duck and did 2 off centuries. Okay, I hope you understand this problem. Thanks for watching.